Disclaimer! So today I'm going to be talking about the two different animatics that leaked. One that is from the Knuckles series and doesn't feature seemingly any spoilers at all, as the entire thing just revolves around Knucks fighting some mech, which we all know obviously Knucks doesn't die, or else Sonic Movie 3 would literally start with a funeral scene. However, the animatic that leaked from Sonic Movie 3 on the other hand is very spoiler heavy with characters that haven't even officially been announced yet. So I'm going to be putting that one later after the Knuckles animatic, plus chapter markers so you can easily avoid that if you want, as it's pretty game-changing, and even I, who expects basically everything that's happened in Sonic's entire history, was genuinely mind-blown. Wow. So we'll get into the two animatics, but first, we're legally required to first do the YouTube Pledge of Allegiance. I will press like, I will double-check I wasn't randomly unsubbed, which YouTube sometimes does, and I will share this video on social media because it helps me out a ton. Now, with the American-style brainwashing out of the way, let's freaking do this! So, of course, we're gonna start with the Knuckles animatic, as it's the most discernible of what's going on, and again, is the only one to not feature anything that's explicitly a spoiler. Now, you won't find these anywhere on YouTube, and there's a good reason for that. Paramount is striking down people re-uploading them, which is very common for these types of leaks. But they're going so above and beyond that even on Twitter, where I see full-length movies getting posted, these animatics are completely absent and struck down from every single account. Even I got a DMCA strike, despite me doing all original sound and audio for it. So I'm only going to be using footage and clips from other media, because even if I use still images, Paramount still has the full right to strike me down, so I need to watch my... All this to say, it's quite literally impossible for any creator to show this, but I'm a sneaky little raccoon, so to get around this, I'm going to be using scenes from other films and shows that demonstrate the exact same points in the animatic, as well as making my own graphics and visuals for concepts that are kinda hard to portray with previously existing movies. So just imagine Knuckles, or whatever anthropomorphic creature I'm referencing in the movie scene I show.
No copyright law in the universe is going to stop me!
Now, with that pretty important disclaimer out of the way, let's get into the first one.
Go!
The Knuckles series animatic starts with Knuckles at a bowling alley, giving his order to a waitress, something very tame. Now, immediately, one thing that's obvious is Knuckles isn't trying to hide his identity and blend in as a regular person, but rather he's just out in the public, undisguised, and nobody is freaking out or reacting in any way. So I assume after the events of Sonic 2, the entire world saw them take down the Death Egg robot, and now views these characters as at least heroes, if not just accepted individuals in society. Wow. How nice. Knuckles then turns and sees a guy frantically sprinting from a car being thrown at him, and this is where a mini action scene begins. So Knux runs outside to investigate what's causing all the ruckus, but gets snatched by a giant metal tentacle. So clearly Sonic Team Japan has some influence here. The giant tentacle shocks Knuckles repeatedly over and over as the mysterious source of these tentacles starts stomping over towards him. That's where we first see the sign that gives us the setting of where the scene is taking place, which is in Reno, Nevada. So I don't know what brings Knuckles and Officer Wade over here, and also whether or not it's plot related, or if they just relocated here after the events of Sonic Movie 2. However, judging from the episode titles that just got revealed literally the night of recording this, they don't start here, but are going to wind up here for some unknown reason that probably will get explained on screen. But back to the animatic, we see Knuckles getting thrown around some more, and he gets tossed into an LED billboard for the bowling alley and completely smashes it with his body. We then find out who is in the mech when it picks up Knuckles and opens a slot, revealing their face and identity. Now, since this is a storyboard, we obviously can't tell who the actor is, but this is actually where it gets really interesting, and is where they're doing some major changes to the previously existing lore. So the title of the animatic specifically says Black Arms Battle at the top, which at first I didn't even put two and two together, but a friend of mine, Xpool, saw this and explained it to me, which for some reason, if you're not aware, the Black Arms are the alien race from 2005's Shadow the Hedgehog. Something I knew, but I just didn't put two and two together. It just went completely over my head. However, as we'll get into by the end of this animatic, it's very definite and safe to say that's not what's happening here. In fact, I highly doubt any sort of alien life will be shown in the series, or even Sonic Movie 3 for that matter. Obviously not counting any of the colorful rodents they'll introduce, because there's bound to be at least one or two of those. But since the Black Arms aren't an alien race here, this also brings into question a lot about the already existing lore, and if they're going to add Black Doom, or if that's all too weird and complicated for the film's universe, and they're just going to retcon all the alien stuff out of Shadow's history, and have him just be created by Gerald Robotnik, who is Ivo Robotnik, aka Eggman's grandfather. And that's just some background for now. We'll go into that more in the Sonic Movie 3 section, but at least for this animatic, just know that the black arms here are not the alien race from the game series. It's not clear if they're a special unit that's a part of GUN, or if there's some other new enemy force that is also super high-tech. Granted, it's likely GUN is on Sonic and Knuckles' side following the events of Sonic Movie 2, so I'd assume it's an entirely disconnected, separate entity. Regardless of that part, the next big thing we see starts after Knuckles gets thrown around and smashed by this mech a bit more. The fight scene goes on and ends when Knuckles gets thrown back into the bowling alley, which he sees Officer Wade and tries to plead for his help. And Officer Wade looks absolutely horrified as he watches Knuckles get dragged away mid-conversation with him. When Wade runs after Knuckles outside, he witnesses him getting his literal ass kicked. And this is where it gets kinda crazy for anyone with a decent knowledge of Sonic lore. Wade tries to yell at the mech operator, who has a scarily similar resemblance to this dude. And the mech pilot also has these weird things on the side of his head that look just like Nebula from Guardians of the Galaxy, except more than one on each side. In fact, I can't show this with a picture, so here's my artistic interpretation that's actually spot on perfect. Next is the big thing, and we see someone fire an attack, which is referred to as the Flames of Disaster. And we know that because Wade literally exclaims it in shock, and it shows the words on screen, even though the rest of this isn't subtitled. And in case your knowledge of Sonic lore is pretty small, the Flames of Disaster is actually a reference to Sonic 06. And while it's not an attack Knuckles has in Sonic 06 and has an entirely repurposed difference, it's very clear by the Flames of Disaster and Black Arms that they're going to be repurposing a lot of names from lore just to keep it interesting, kind of like they did with Green Hills of Montana. And it's well believed to be Knuckles that did that attack, which also fired a laser towards the mech, because after this, Knuckles just starts absolutely f***ing up the mech, kind of like how Dad did to Matt Watson from Super Mega. Man, I miss Super Mega. So this is essentially Knuckles' equivalent to the electric form Sonic has at the end of Sonic Movie 1 when he sends Robotnik to the Mushroom Planet. Now, everyone was referring to that as Super Sonic before Sonic Movie 2 came out, but that form technically doesn't have an official name. So I'm just going to call it the Bluish Rage form. And that's where the entire scene takes a huge turn and we start seeing new stuff. So Knuckles goes bat crazy and goes from being wrecked to absolutely rampaging Black Arms. He's got his fire fists that we saw a tiny bit in Sonic Movie 2, but now here are much bigger and have way more fire than normal. And just like how Sonic has his electricity normally, but when he gets in his bluish rage, he gets 1,000 times more electric, well, Knuckles' fire works exactly like that too. So Knuckles then goes so insano mode that the bald dude he's attacking opens his mouth completely in a simultaneously terrified and pogging style. Now, here's where it gets wild with another weird reveal, as well as something significantly darker. So Knuckles in his rage form flies upwards directly towards the top of a building using the ability that's referred to as the Flames of Disaster. Knuckles' form got a name, why didn't Sonic's? Regardless, what's weird is next, Wade then fires off this brown glove rocket, and that hits and knocks down a globe on the top of the skyscraper. Knuckles catches the globe midair, and immediately it sets ablaze, probably because, you know, he's on fire. To which Knuckles, like LeBron, dunks the globe onto Black Arms, destroying him so badly that there's a giant burst of red liquid splattering from him, and gee, I wonder what that could be. Who could guess? Maybe his tanks were just filled with Hawaiian Punch. This first animatic then ends with Knuckles landing in front of the obliterated Black Arms, literally Iron Man style. So that was the Knuckles animatic.
Very cool.
Now with that, let's get into Sonic Movie 3's animatic. So this one is much more intense and full of nutso insano stuff every 3 seconds, with it also being very full with reveals and jaw droppers. So just keep that in mind as we go through this one. So the scene begins with Super Shadow in space, seeing a ship that's breaking apart, and that ship is presumed by its look and story context to be the Space Colony Ark. We see Jim Carrey's Robotnik in it, so he's now confirmed to be 100% in this. However, that one isn't a spoiler really, since we'll find that out as soon as the first trailer and any official casting info comes out, as well as the super obvious one, which is him showing up at the premiere. But back to the animatic, Robotnik is freaking out, trying to fix the warnings of engine failures and everything shutting down. He routes auxiliary power to the engines to start them up again, and we see both Eggman and Shadow, which Shadow is outside the ship watching through the window, as Robotnik is sweating and focusing on getting the engines back up. That is until, alas, it still fails regardless. We then see Shadow in the Ark behind Robotnik and Agent Stone bringing him a latte. What kind? Well, you already know. Now, this part might not even be actually happening in reality, because what we see next makes things very confusing for everyone. What's weird is we start to see a bunch of flashbacks of what's seemingly been going on between movies. In particular, we see Agent Stone pulling Robotnik from the rubble after Sonic Movie 2, as well as Robotnik in the hospital being spoon-fed by Stone. It then goes back to reality, and we see Super Shadow fly around to push the ship. And this is where the scene quite literally goes crazy. So the Ark gets pushed away from Earth, and as Super Shadow is pushing it, the clocks on Robotnik's wristwatch start bugging out and spinning really quickly. And that's where the title on this one comes into play, as it's titled Space Station Time Travel, which will be one of the first appearances of time travel in the Sonic series as a whole. And while it has happened in little ways a couple times across the franchise, this is the first one in the movie and will be a huge factor for all future lore, especially considering how previously the quote-unquote time travel was almost entirely done just to remove stories from the canon and not mess up other Sonic lore such as 06 and Prime. However, in this, it's going to be way different and isn't just going to be some boring reset, something Sonic fans historically have never liked. Now, as soon as Super Shadow starts pushing the ship, the cracks and brakes on the inside start getting undone and the ship slowly gets repaired. Robotnik does a PTSD 1,000-mile soldier stare, while a lot of scenes happen around him that seemingly make no sense and are all a mix of either flashbacks or just reality blurring and bending as things start getting pretty wacky. So we see a brief glimpse of Super Sonic and Super Shadow fighting, and we also see two Robotniks firing laser fingers at each other, and it's the same guy. Now, this isn't a spoiler because this isn't actually happening. This is just like images as reality bends. So keep that in mind. We then see Knuckles, Tails, and Robotnik all together grunting, and it looks like they're focusing playing a video game, or maybe they're controlling something. I don't know. It's probably just a quick shot for comedic relief. However, as this is all happening, the main Robotnik, who's at the center of the room, then gets like a really worried look on his face and runs over to see the red chamber under the hallway, activated and glowing as soon as Shadow started pushing the ship, and everything starts warping and getting trippy, so much so that as Super Shadow keeps progressively pushing the ship, even on the outside, the ship just starts physically warping, bending, and shrinking in on itself. And suddenly, everything that's happened up until now starts making a bit of sense, but what happens next, there's one of two theories of what that is, and one theory is much darker than the other. So Shadow has looked furious this whole time pushing the ship, and you'd think it's possibly just because of his character and that he's always a pouty, angry dude, or even because the workload from pushing this whole massive ship through space.
Although technically, since there is no gravity in space and they aren't in a planet's orbital sphere, it actually wouldn't take almost any effort to move the ship, even one as big as the Ark.
Shut up, nerd! But we see Super Shadow again, and he is looking very tired, and he closes his eyes in acceptance with everything, including him, fading to white. Eggman is making this weird, funny pog face, and it's in an expression where I can't tell if this is the end with how worried he is, or if it's good. It's really hard to tell. They drew it in a really neutral way, and that's where the two theories come into play. So to me, it's really unclear if Shadow is pushing the ship so that it implodes, which we do see, or the other possibility, which is that judging by the title of this specific scene having time travel in it, this very well could not be the end of Robotnik, and what looks like an explosion, or rather implosion, could just be from them time traveling. We aren't even sure if this is towards the end of the movie or if Robotnik time travels halfway and this is just the second act of the movie. What we do know is that with so many unsure if Jim Carrey would come back to the Sonic series, since he stated he's retired and done acting multiple times now, it would also make perfect sense if they used the ending of Sonic Movie 3 as a chance to yeet him off and end the character in the movie universe, which would also be interesting because this would be the first continuity across any Sonic media to permanently off Eggman. It's a very risky move, and many are asking what villain they would do after Robotnik, but the sad reality is, I think Sonic 3 will be the last Sonic movie for a long time. There's a rumor circulating about a second spin-off series, this one starring Shadow, and I do imagine if this isn't time travel, that this will be how they retcon Shadow's amnesia from the end of Sonic Adventure 2, as the ending there where he falls to Earth after going Super Shadow is a similar situation to what happened here, so I can see this being how he has amnesia in the movie universe. So in short, they're either exploded and gone forever, or it's just time travel, and we're going to see more of both these characters. Now, I want to get into my theory as to why we're even seeing these animatics leak, and I think it might be tied to a single individual releasing this purely out of spite. The main reason for this being that not only is the Knuckles animatic from episode 6 of the Knuckles series, in which there's confirmed to be 6 episodes, but also for the Sonic Movie 3 one, we don't know where this scene from the animatic takes place. But for the sake of the conversation, it's presumably closer to the end of the movie, so the fact that these are the only two animatics animatics to leak, especially when neither of the other two movies had anything like this happen, and both are seemingly from the end, is very, very suspicious. So the mere fact that this much leaked, nonetheless once featuring a bunch of yet to be announced factors in the movie, all makes me wonder what actually happened behind the scenes for it to get this far. Another thing I want to mention is that a lot of people are freaking out like these leaks entirely ruin the movies. And I won't speak for anyone else, but at least for me, these animatics, which are super rough sketches and not even a glimpse of how the film or show will look, seeing these doesn't make me any less excited for these projects at all. In fact, knowing that Robotnik is back and this will either be the real conclusion or for the first time ever, time travel, and potentially for all we know, this is the halfway point of the film? Well, I don't know if you're bigger brain than me, but I still know nothing that's going on other than Robotnik and Super Shadow will show up. Stuff that you probably could have assumed. At least the Super Shadow part. Like, come on. He has to fight Supersonic somehow. Knowing all this isn't hampering my excitement, but actually making me more excited and wanting to see this movie a ton more, not less. This is easily my most anticipated Sonic project of 2024, and despite the rumors of a game releasing towards the end of the year, which would capitalize off the success and new audience from this movie, I still am way more excited for this film than any new game. So these leaks only serve to enhance the experience, not ruin it. That said, if actual scenes started leaking, like from film, then I would be disappointed, and that would be a big bummer. But if it's just these animatics, I don't really care. Now, if you want to see these animatics yourselves, I don't even know where to point you towards since they've gotten taken down from every source on every website. So I guess just use your head and my graphics to imagine it? I don't know. Sorry, but there's really nothing I can do about it. I made my own version of the entire Knuckles animatic with sound design, a score with music from Sonic X, and voice lines from a bunch of games, as well as some jokes thrown in there. But Twitter took it down eventually too, so I don't know. I guess you'll have to look around and try to get creative with where to find it. With that, I'm super excited for Sonic Movie 3 and the Knuckles series, which still doesn't have any official information attached to it. And I hope you liked my video, despite me not being able to show the animatic. I really tried my best with the graphics. Like if you liked, double check you're subbed, and again, YouTube be undoing that. Turn on the bell. I know nobody ever promotes it anymore, but hey, I rarely upload, so it's worth getting notified for, right? And join my Discord if you feel so inclined. It's pretty epic, and I'm posting exclusive stuff in there. And go watch my video where I covered 6 game stories. There's a lot to talk about. I mean, it's 6 stories. So go peep that, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye. Oh, also the peace thing. Lots of love. Peace. Peace. See, I said it.
I got 40 on me, got it on my wrist. I got 15 in my trunk, pull up from the mist. Teacher chunks, I up here, pull up, bent on my wrist. Teacher's filter, cause we count, I'm ready for this.